Kaido vs Big Mom debuted on OPTC Global on the 26th of March 2021. This was the debut of Versus characters in One Piece Treasure Cruise, introducing the mechanic of essentially having two legends in one. The characters that debuted in this batch include Jack the Drought, Animal Kingdom Pirates lead performer, Queen the Plague, Animal Kingdom Pirates lead performer, and King the Wildfire, Animal Kingdom Pirates lead performer. And the Sugo-Fest exclusive character of the batch introduced a versus character where one side of the character aimed to clear enemies with wave clearing effects and the other aimed to be more tanky and heal with similar and recovery slots. All the while both characters with similar specials that granted an attack boost and slot change with the opportunity to provide a slot boost in the following turn. Introducing Kaido vs Big Mom, the two threats. In this series, we'll be traveling back in time to experience some of the older Sugo-Fest exclusive characters in their prime, aiming to show just what it was like to use these characters on their debut. I hope you enjoy the video, and without further ado, let's enter the Legends of OPTC. So thank you very much for checking out yet another episode of the Legends of OPTC, and in today's video we're looking at a brand new batch of characters that was very much anticipated, being the introduction of Versus units into Treasure Cruise. So Versus units were like a whole different thing. Like, this was the first time that they'd ever come out. They did come out a lot earlier on Japan, and on Global we were just kind of waiting. Like, this was like the next big character that most people were waiting for after like Roger came out, pretty much. A lot of people were really looking forward to this. I do think though, at this point in time, I don't remember if we knew that Ace versus Akainu was a thing, but I know that that was also like a big character that basically everyone was looking forward to. But we're going to get to the breakdown and how these characters work very shortly. Before we do that though, 3 rare recruits debuted alongside them. All 3 of these actually saw quite a lot of play. So here we have Jack the Drought being int-driven powerhouse. And the big thing about him is he's got a really good generic special, doing fixed damage, removing 5 turns of bind and attack down, and then a 2x all boost to all characters. Like, actually just a generically good rare recruit special ability. Really good, and that's basically all he does. Not really too much else to really talk about with his kit. His special ability is the only really desirable factor about this character. Everything else is kind of like whatever. But overall, like, this character has seen a lot of play. Just because there's not a lot of characters that do specifically this for his types and classes. So very good character that saw quite a lot of play. Then we have Queen. I would say out of the 3 rare recruits, Queen was the one that saw the least amount of play. So also Sight and then Driven Powerhouse. And with this character, he would change all slots to recovery at the start of the fight, which could have some pretty interesting use cases. And then his special ability would remove Blue Shield and Rainbow Shield by 5 turns and give you a 3x chain lock for 1 turn. So this is like mainly good if you're going up against like a mini boss, for example, where they have some defensive effects, and it gives you a little bit of offense with a 3x chain lock. But of course, now that like chain boundary is a thing, usually chain locks are just not as desirable anymore, unless if like the chain lock is just absurdly high. But most of the time, chain locks aren't really that valuable anymore. And then of course the utility of removing the 2 defensive effects was honestly pretty good. So yeah, not really too much else to really talk about there, but still being able to change all slots to recovery at the start of the fight, that was actually pretty nice, and you could abuse that in some really interesting circumstances. So next we have King. So King is pretty valuable for what he does, because he has he's in like a really weird archetype with what he does with his special. So we'll go through it. So strength driven powerhouse this time around. And notably, his crewmate abilities and special go hand in hand, as he is able to give powerhouse characters 2 turns of cooldown, change adjacent slots into matching, and then reducing burn and special bind and blindness by 5 turns. So this character is like ultra focused on utility, and then focusing in on his sailor abilities, being able to resist 2 turns of special reverse, 5 turns of special bind, and then I believe when he got limit break expansion, yeah, he got the fear reduction. So on release he didn't have that, but when fear started to become a thing where it would negate your crewmate abilities, obviously if you remove his crewmate abilities out of it, his special is borderline terrible, like useless. It's really not that good. But with the Limit Break expansion, this was one of the key characters that most people would go ahead and Limit Break expand straight away when it was available to them, because having fear reduction on this with the crewmate abilities and special, honestly just fantastic. There's just not a lot of characters in the game that remove both special bind and special reverse simultaneously. However, you do have to keep in mind that he only gives cooldown to powerhouse characters specifically. I have definitely overlooked that in the past when I've built teams. He does only give cooldown to powerhouse units, which is a little bit of a downside, but again, if you're building around that, yeah, pretty good character overall. And now we can get to the big bad pair, I guess, themselves, Kaido versus Big Mom. I remember when this first came out, I got really unlucky when this Sugo-Fest dropped. I had to go to the 30th multi to get this character guaranteed. It was pretty rough, but this character on release was incredibly strong. So it takes a lot of aspects of previously released Kaidos and previously released Big Moms and kind of jumbles them together into one character. So we have the character here where we have a strength Kaido being driven powerhouse. We have an int Big Mom who is also driven and powerhouse. Then you have the captain ability. So they have slightly different captain abilities. They are relatively similar, but they are also different. So remember, for those of you who don't know how versus units work, when you put this character onto your team, you are given a prompt to ask which of the two characters you want on your team. Do you want Kaido to be on your team or the Big Mom? When you select it, let's say for the example you select Kaido, the rest of your team cannot include any Big Moms. So while versus units are technically like almost basically 2 units in one, not like a dual unit per se, but it's basically 2 separate Sugo-Fest exclusives, and then you can just select one of those 2 to be on your team. There is still a bit of a downside to it though, because it means that if there are supports that can specifically like attach to Big Mom, they cannot attach to Kaido and vice versa. So like Big Mom actually has very, very good support effects, but they can't attach to Kaido, even though these characters are technically the same unit, which is a little bit of a downside, but they more than make up for that with the ability of versus specials, which we will get to. So Kaido, let's look at Kaido, right? His captain ability gives 2 turns of cooldown at the start of the fight, so you love to have that cooldown production, and then he gives a attack boost to strength, dex, and int characters, being a 5 times boost, 1.3 times HP. He would also deal 20% of enemies' current HP and all damage to all enemies at the end of the turn, so he's always doing end of turn damage, which allows you to get around resilience debuffs, and he also boosts the chances of landing tandem slots and makes them beneficial. So the fact that he is focusing on strength, dex, and int, that's what you want to build your team around. Now conversely, Big Mom is a little different, where she would give the attack boost to strength, psi, and int. So Kaido specifically gives dex, whereas Big Mom is psi focused. So if you're running like a hybrid scenario, you want to mainly build around strength and int, 1.5 times HP with Big Mom, whereas Kaido was 1.3, and then boost the chances of getting a recovery slot and makes recovery and similar slots beneficial to all characters, and you can consume your recovery and similar slots when you tap perfect. Now when this character came out, I think the debuff of when you consume a recovery slot to transform that into damage wasn't necessarily a thing, but obviously this effect isn't as useful these days, I would say. But that's kind of like the main difference, is Kaido gives you the cooldown and slightly less HP, whereas Big Mom is more focused around HP and more focused on healing rather than like the offensive abilities of Kaido. Most people would prefer to use Kaido when they were clearing content because the 2 turns of cooldown is pretty invaluable, right? So as for the crewmate abilities, they both cannot be blown away, and then also makes tandem recovery similar beneficial to strength and int. Pretty stock standard stuff. Now they do have different specials, where the special ability of Kaido would be a 20% health cut to all enemies, changing block slots and recovery slots into tandem, and then boosting the attack of strength, dex, and int by 2.25 for 1 turn, and then if during that turn you hit 3 perfects, you boost the orb effects of strength, dex, and int characters by 2.5 times in that next turn. So yeah, it's a pretty stock standard special, not really a lot going on here. Health cut, orb change, attack boost, and then if you hit the perfects, you get the orb boost on the next turn. Like really not a lot going on. Now when we have a look at Big Mom special, again, 20% health cut, changes block and tandem slots into recovery. So they have slightly different orb change, where they both change block, but then Kaido can change recovery to tandem, and then Big Mom can change tandem into recovery, so a little bit different there. And then Big Mom would give an attack boost to strength, psi, and int, and then if you hit the perfects, you get the orb boost in the following turn. So they both give you an attack boost, which turns into an orb boost, but they have different typings and different orb changes. But again, it's mostly the same character in a lot of instances. And then we get to the versus effect, right? So the versus effect, the way that it works is that in order to launch the effect, I believe every versus effect is somewhat similar to this, you need to consume a certain amount of slots. Now, in this character's instance, you have to consume 10 tandem recovery or similar slots with your normal attacks. So, of course, if you're using them as a captain, they will generate a higher chance of tandem or a higher chance of recovery slots. So, like, best case scenario, you run a Kaido captain and a Big Mom captain. They both are making both tandem and recovery slots appear more often, which will generate the gauge increase. Now, Kaido's versus effect was incredible because it would go ahead and deal 500 times his attack and typeless damage to all enemies at the end of the turn for 3 turns, and also deal 3 times damage dealt from this character as damage from his normal attacks at the end of the turn to the enemy with the highest HP for 3 turns. So it's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but what does this actually mean? Okay, remember, versus ability buffs cannot be removed by the crew or enemy effects, which are very valuable. So what this means is that for 3 turns, Kaido does 500 times his attack at the end of the turn. This is also, you gotta keep in mind that Kaido will also do a 20% health cut first. This will trigger first. So you do a 20% health cut, and then it does 500 times his attack. And then, let's say Kaido does 1,000,000 damage. You multiply his normal attack damage, which in that case was 1,000,000, by 3, which would be 3,000,000 damage, and that targets the enemy with the highest HP for 3 turns. So you get a 20% health cut, then you get 500 times attack to all enemies, and then his normal attack times 3 to the enemy with the highest HP, also for 3 turns. So yeah, you can get yourself in a pretty interesting scenario where, like, Kaido can just clear stages just by performing a regular normal attack because of the health cut, the damage, and then this as well. Like, yeah, some crazy stuff can happen with this. Now, Big Mom is slightly different, where it goes ahead and says, makes your own normal attacks ignore damage, reducing barriers, buffs, and defense for 3 turns. That ability, incredibly strong. And then changes recovery slots into similar slots for 3 turns. And then recovers HP based on the number of enemies that you defeat times 15 times character's attack for 3 turns. Okay, so let's break this one down. Basically, it turns Big Mom into like a Sulong character for 3 turns, which is really good. Recovery becoming similar is also a really cool ability, because what it means is that when you're generating these, so you can use this this versus effect first, and then when you use Big Mom to change block and tandem into recovery, they become similar slots instead. Remember that similar slots are basically like rainbow slots where they cannot be manipulated, so you could use this preemptively to ensure that when you enter a new stage that your slots are not changed, which is really strong. And then also, when you kill an enemy, you recover 15 times your HP. That's basically what, 15 times this character's recovery for 3 turns. So that's basically what it means. So yeah, Big Mom can provide some offense with this, making it so you don't have to really worry about the enemy's defensive effects. And then being able to get similar slots also pretty useful. And then also being able to recover whenever you kill something is also quite good. So yeah, that was the breakdown of Kaido and Big Mom. Really, really interesting characters when they first came out in terms of how they actually work. In Rumble, of course, they're very similar in the way that when you build them on a Rumble team, you select one of them. One of those characters becomes the unit that you use. The other character is unable to be used. But they never really saw a bunch of play in Rumble. Big Mom saw a little bit of play because she was kind of like a late game sweeper, but her damage wasn't really like amazing or anything, but people potentially used her as a late game sweeper. Unfortunately, versus Kaido was just kind of never good. Yeah, you can get a 90% health cut, but then he gives himself a huge special CT debuff, which means you can't really use his special again for a really long time. Just never really was that useful. But anyways, that's the breakdown of Kaido versus Big Mom. Let's go ahead now and build a team with these characters, use them in game, and I'm really, really looking forward to this one. It's been a long time since I've used Kaido versus Big Mom, so let's go ahead and open up Treasure Cruise and get this sorted. Okay, so we are in game right now with Kaido versus Big Mom. So we're going to use the hybrid captain scenario of having 1 Kaido and 1 Big Mom. It wasn't typically the best way to build teams, actually. Usually the best way to do it was to have like fully dedicate in on Big Mom or fully dedicate in on Kaido. And typically Kaido was the one that people would like to use as captains because of that cooldown reduction, which was quite key. But nonetheless, we're here to use these characters together because they work very well in this content against Clash, Onami, and Shinobu. This Clash event came out when Kaido versus Big Mom dropped to kind of showcase how they actually would work. So let's go ahead and jump into the content. So we are using a couple of key support characters. You know, we mentioned during the breakdown that Big Mom has really, really good support characters, but Kaido has a couple of good ones too. And especially when we got deeper into Wano, Kaido definitely got a lot more support as the event went on. on. But let's go ahead and get started here. So you can see that for Nami and Shinobu, at the start of the quest, they actually give us 15 turns of lowering the chances of landing on a specific slot. And you can see it's Strength, Dex, Quick, Psi, and Int. So they really want you to land on recovery and tandem slots, which is pivotal for Kaido versus Big Mom. And this is kind of like the main issue that a lot of people had with Versus characters when they were coming out, is that in order to use their Versus abilities, you need to consume slots that are very specific, and if you don't land on those slots, you know, you're kind of screwed because you just don't get the Versus ability. And especially if you're trying to design a team to beat a specific piece of content, if you're not hitting those slots, you're just kind of screwed. But of course in this content they make that a little bit more easier for you, and still in Kizuna Clash they still give you the ability of charging your Versus specials. I do believe initially they didn't actually charge your Versus specials in Kizuna Clash, but now they do, obviously. But we do want to consume some slots, but because we do have these debuffs, we do want to go ahead and use a couple of slots as well, because that will enable us to generate more of these recovery slots and tandem slots. But we do want to get a little bit of stall. We actually don't really need to do any stall, to be honest, because this is why I put Kid on the team. Kid can help us wave clear and enable us to kind of just get some cooldown reduction. So that's really not going to be a problem. But the only issue is we do want to make sure that we are getting the Versus abilities ready to go. Well, specifically Kaido's Versus ability is the most important one to have for this piece of content, which I think should be okay. I think we can just go ahead and use the Kid special now. This Kid was a free-to-play character that came out during a Kizuna Clash, and this character is really good, man. This character is really, really good because he enables you to just wave clear stages, very similar to what Treasure Map Kid used to do, or Coliseum Kid, should I say, but people would use him a lot on Treasure Map. But at this point, we do want to just consume these slots just to generate some new ones in their place. And it doesn't matter that these characters are not dead, because Kid's special will just kill them for us, which is great. Okay, stage 3, we have these guard characters. You can see, look at those slots. Look at all those tandem and recovery slots, which is going to be perfect for us. So we get hit with Bind and Despair here, which is not going to be a problem because we do have the Corazon support on Law, enabling us to get around those abilities. And then we can just, well, we still have Kid special. I don't know how much damage these guys are going to do to Kid, but with Kid, but we can just go ahead and consume these slots, and Kid special should just kill, I believe. We get a 20% health cut from Kaido and then Kid special. Boom, there you go. And now we move on to stage 4. So here we have the first mini boss of Nami and Shinobu. And look at those slots as well. The slots are looking real, real good. So the thing is with Nami and Shinobu is that they, on the final stage, on stage 5, they actually do revive. So we actually need, we need some burst here, we need some burst on stage 5, and there is a revive as well. So there's 3 different turns where we ideally want some buffs. So this is where we can use some of our special abilities. So you can see here we're inflicted with special reverse, and we also are inflicted with special bind. But this is where King can be very useful. We mentioned earlier that he's one of those key characters that can give you special reverse resistance and also special bind resistance. Very, very valuable to have characters that can do that. And we can also go ahead and use a Big Mom special here. So Big Mom is, well, we could use the Versus ability first, because we don't specifically need Big Mom's Versus effect for the final stage. So let's go ahead and use her Versus ability first. Remember how we talked about this one. So her Versus ability enables her normal attacks to go through defensive effects and stuff. Not going to be important here. But it has an added effect which will go ahead and transform recovery slots into similar slots. And then every time we kill something, we are going to be healing. So by using that, when we go ahead and use the special ability now of Big Mom, the tandem slots that we have on our team will be transformed into similar slots instead of recovery, which doesn't really mean much in terms of damage, but hey, I like having the similar slots rather than the tandem, I guess, for this point in time anyway. And remember, at this point, super tandem characters weren't really a thing yet, so people, or most legends, were manipulating tandem slots to just be matching slots, basically. So with this in mind, we want to go ahead and hit 3 perfects, because by performing 3 perfects, we're going to get a substantial orb boost from Big Mom's special on the final stage. So I think ideally we're going to hit with our strength characters first to ensure that we are not going to kill too quickly. Otherwise, we won't hit our 3 perfects for that condition. So let's go ahead and do this. Very, very comfortable there. We got the 4 perfects in. So they are going to go ahead and use their special ability. I don't know if they do anything on their special here. Pretty cool little special animation here from Nami and Shinobu. So they're just going to revive and then they're gone. And of course we get the heal from the similar slots, already back to full HP. So we're looking pretty good. Okay, moving on to the boss stage though. So the boss stage has a lot of different gimmicks here. They will go ahead and give us 6 turns of attack down. And that's specifically why I put page 1 as a support on Kaido, which will go ahead and remove 2 turns of attack down, which means when we activate the special ability of Jack, that will remove all the attack down. Now we also have this Bind and Despair here, which is also pretty annoying, but this is why I brought the special ability of Law. This Law removes Bind and Despair by 5 turns, so he's going to be great. He also does 100,000 fixed damage, which doesn't really matter. But just removing the Bind and Despair is the important part. Then we can go ahead and use the special ability of Jack to remove the attack down. Now, Jack would normally give us a 2x orb boost, but because we already have this significant orb boost from Big Mom, not going to be a problem at all. And then we'll go ahead and use all of these abilities. So let's go ahead and use the Versus ability of Kaido now. So this Versus ability of Kaido is exceptional because it does allow you to kind of just steamroll a lot of like wave clear, like little stages, like really low HP stages. His Versus effect just dominates. It just does so much damage. And now we can go ahead and use his special, which will give us an attack boost turn 1, and then if we hit our perfects, we get the orb boost stage 2 on the second turn. But this enables us to have the orb boost from Big Mom from the previous turn. We have the attack boost now, and then we can get an orb boost on the next stage. And then the Versus effect from Kaido is going to be doing some heavy lifting, specifically once we get to this next turn here. So we do want to hit our 3 perfects, so we're going to hit with our int characters first, finish off with our strength characters, as we'll have type advantage, and we'll see what we do here. Let's do this. Perfect, so we hit 4 perfects. So we're going to have the orb boost in the next stage. Nami and Shinobu revive with 7.5 million. And one of the major debuffs here, as you can see, that after they revive, they did inflict us with a debuff, which means that we can only tap with 2 characters. Now this normally is a major issue. However, with the ability of Kaido's Versus effect, this is going to be a non-factor, right? So even though we can only tap with 2 characters, have a look and see how much damage we can do with Kaido's Versus ability. Let's see this. Maybe I'll just tap with Kaido. Let's not even tap with any other character. I think we should have enough damage to get through. Will it be enough? No, we should probably do some normal attacks first, just to be safe. Let's tap with the non-matching slot with Big Mom and finish with Kaido. Let's see this. Alright, let's see this. Health cut 500 times, and then the 3 times his normal attack damage on top of it. Whew! Man, feels good. Like, it just feels good to use effects such as this in Treasure Cruise. But of course, with normal attacks only being as prevalent as it is, these type of strategies aren't really things anymore, which is pretty unfortunate because it's super satisfying being able to clear content like that. But, you know, it is what it is. So, anyways, it was still a lot of fun to go ahead and use these old characters because it has been a very long time since I've used Kaido and Big Mom in content. And look, Kaido and Big Mom don't have a 6+ yet. They haven't given any Versus character a 6+, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they could potentially do with characters such as these in the future, because there is a lot of room to grow for these types of units. And I think, yeah, obviously they debuted with Limit Break expansion, so they can't really do much in that regard. They don't have level Limit Break at all either. So there's like lots of room to grow for these Versus characters because they definitely need a little bit of a buff. They just they don't really do a hell of a lot, let's say in 2025 that is. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video today, and if you did, make sure to go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date with all the content I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. On that, guys, I will see you guys within the next video.